human-centric lighting. Dr. Hans Laschefski joined the company UL in June 2018 and is looking back on 28 years of experience with different lighting companies dealing with retail lighting, LED stage and studio lighting, and the supplier industry. And during this time, he's been responsible for product certification, optical design, quality management, and business development. With his interior lighting team of the German Lighting Society, Hans has been organizing workshops about recent developments and trends in lighting since 1995. He stresses that human-centric lighting can improve health and well-being of the building users and enhance the value of the building. So I'll give the word to Hans.
Thanks a lot. So for me, it's the first time to be on stage after 2 years. And to be honest, first of all, thanks a lot for the invite by Athens. And I need to admit that such a presentation just in front of mine is a real challenge. Nevertheless, I will try to entertain you the next 15 minutes, and due to my academic background, I will give this presentation accordingly to the academic requirements. So, first part, 5 minutes, needs to be easy. We can ask someone from the street. No problem at all, he will be able to understand it. The second part is dedicated to the professionals, so to you. And from the last part, let's pray together that I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so perhaps you have heard already a little bit about human-centric lighting. And I'm really pleased to see your engagement in order to save energy. Because a few kilowatt hours you are saving, I will definitely need for my illumination. Nevertheless, I saw some hints in regards to well building, and I think the time is right to step forward. To step forward in a way that our illumination becomes a little bit better than it is currently. But first of all, let me talk a little bit about the company I'm from. I come from the company UL. It's not UL. Yeah? So many people ask us, oh, what is this company about? It's UL, it's Underwriter Laboratories. And we are a company that does usually nothing else but product certification. So we test, for example, HVAC units, luminaires, whether they are safe or not, in regards to all kinds of standards. It needs to be in UL standard, it could be, but most of the topics we do here in Europe are dedicated by so-called IEC standards or evaluated by IEC standards. And finally, there are 3 companies which have our UL logo. The one that does the standards is UL Standards and Engagement. Those guys are not for profit, so they just work for fun, like the guys from research institutes. And I belong to the UL solution business, and we need to make the money that the other ones have the fun. Nevertheless, we are, I would say, in addition to me, another 13,990 employees around the world. We have labs around the world, and if someone is really interested in product safety, he can show up, and we are usually somewhere around. But now, let's talk a little bit about human-centric lighting. So first of all, there is no real definition what is really human-centric lighting. So there is the so-called IALD here on the lower left corner in blue, International Association of Lighting Designers, and they defined it a little bit. So it's all about the perception, and we know that light is needed for a good visual perception. It's about sustainability, it's about mood. We can definitely improve the productivity of people by the right light at the right time. And it's all about the stabilization of the circadian rhythm of your body. Because if you are not exposed to daylight, if you, for example, live in a bunker, and imagine that has really happened, then you will be disconnected from the 24-hour cycle, which is usually the one that triggers our biorhythm. Your day will be most likely extended to 24.5 up to 25 hours. In rare cases, your day will be shorter. It will be only 23 hours. It depends a little bit on your physiology. But there are only a very, very few people which have really a 24-hour cycle in their hormones, in their body itself. So why is it? The sun finally adjusted for a very long time our biorhythm to 24 hours. And what happens here is, if you are exposed to daylight and it is a sunny day, you have approximately 100,000 lux. That is the value we are talking at lighting engineers always. That is nothing else but the brightness, a kind of brightness value, a kind of. It's not correct, but so it is the illumination level. And even if the sky is overcasted, you have something around 6,000 to 20,000 lux. But what do we really face in indoor applications like offices? 500 lux. There is in between a factor of 400. So there is a little bit, I would say, a disconnection, I would say. Nevertheless, this 24-hour cycle really triggers our alertness. It gives us more or less, for example, in the very early morning hours, a very low body temperature. And then finally, around 7:30, usually our melatonin level should be, the production of melatonin should be stopped. Why? Because usually we need a high melatonin level if we like to go to sleep in order to have a good sleep. But finally, in the morning hours, due to high brightness, for example by daylight, this melatonin production stops, and then we receive finally around 10 o'clock the highest alertness. Then at 3:30, 2:30, best coordination, 3:30, fastest reaction in time. So at least we have definitely during the daytime different mood, different activity levels, and this should be really adjusted to the 24-hour day cycle. And therefore, we need somehow to adjust our internal clock so that this comes really up to a 24-hour cycle. So, but now we need to learn a little bit about lighting, just a little, and very fast. So first of all, we are, I would say, usually using this degrees Celsius scale. And everybody knows at 0 degrees, water is freezing, and in space we face the lowest temperature at all, that is minus 273.15 degrees Celsius. Now the funny guy, Mr. Kelvin, decided, okay, let's do it in a different way. We start in space with 0 degrees, and we come up at 0 degrees Celsius with 273 Kelvin. Why do I just mention it? Because usually if you talk to someone who is somehow familiar with the color temperature of light, he will tell you something about Kelvin. There is nothing else but a difference of 273.15 degrees or Kelvin, it doesn't matter. So now we know a little bit about this color temperature, but what does it mean? Finally, imagine you hold in your hand, perhaps it's not a good idea, but just as an experiment, a metal block. And then you start to heat this up. The first event that happens is that sooner or later, this metal block starts to glow, very reddish. Yeah? That is perhaps at an area of 2,700, 2,500 Kelvin. So at this temperature, you're facing a reddish, gluing metal block. Now, if you heat it up more and more and more, it comes to 6,000 or 10,000 Kelvin. This glue is finally, this glow is finally very cold, very bluish. So there is a very, very cold atmosphere. That is the reason why those temperatures here, even if they have a high temperature, are associated with a very cool color temperature of the light. Yeah? So high color temperature, but cool light, or low color temperature and very warm light. That is important to know. But there is a little, I would say, a little trick. As you can see, if now the spectrum is analyzed, you will get a point here in this CIE color table. And this is finally associated with a color temperature. But this is not precise, because as you can see, for example, here, this is a line which is called the judge straight lines. So 3000 Kelvin could be here, 3000 Kelvins could be here. So if you finally decide and discuss the topic of lighting with a lighting designer and you tell him, hey, I would like to have 3000 Kelvin in my office, or 4000 Kelvin in my office, or even 5500 Kelvin, you give him a very high degree of freedom to choose LEDs, for example, which gives 3000 Kelvin, but you never know whether it's very on the left-hand side or in the upper right corner. So it's a little bit difficult to decide which color temperature do I need now in order to get somehow my circadian rhythm synchronized to the 24-hour cycle. And there is another, I would say, tricky part, because as you can see, usually if we measure light, we measure the horizontal illumination level, which comes from this vector here. But for human-centric lighting applications, so in order to adjust and to synchronize you to the 24-hour cycle, we need to know a little bit more about this horizontal vector, which is orthogonal to your eye. So that really hits your eye. That is important because the light that really hits you on the retina will give you finally the right information what time of day it is. So first of all, I need to remind you there are legal requirements. Legal requirements that have to be fulfilled, yeah? Because it should be a safe workplace, for example, in an office or in a manufacturing company. Yeah? And as you can see, there is I would say on an European level, there is already a standard which is very, very old, but always renewed. That is the EN 12464. And if you design the lighting accordingly to the requirements, you will have a safe workplace. But human-centric lighting aspects could be added. That is not really an issue, but how to manage it. First of all, there are a lot of standards around. And as you can see, already in the year 2009, the first German specification has been launched by the Dean, because you need to understand the knowledge around circadian lighting is only 20 years old. In 2001, we understood finally how it worked. And as you can see, in 2016, Well started to add these requirements to their standards. In 2018, that is very important, at least here in Europe or in the rest of the world, the CIE, that is the Illumination Standardization Committee in Vienna, started with an S026. We, as UL, started in 2019, and today, most recently, the DIN TS 67600 is dealing with this topic since April 2022. So what is the requirement? And this is now here important, because what you can see, there is a unit that is called 250 medilux. I need to skip the definition of the medilux, but you will find the medilux also in the well requirements. And it is nothing else but the metrics that has been introduced by the CIE. And if you define in your requirements in the illumination that at least these 250 millilux should be reached, preferred in the morning hours, finally preferred for a time range of 2 hours, then you can be sure that your illumination will give you an additional healthy benefit for the application. Nevertheless, as you can see within the CIE SO26 and the CIE, the International Commission on Illumination, there is mentioned what is really important here. These so-called non-image forming factors of light, they will synchronize your human biological clock. They will shift the phase of the circadian rhythm to the 24 hours. And for those who are sometimes traveling to the US or to Asia and who face already jet lag situations, they might realize that in aircrafts, the technology is already used, because ahead of the landing of the aircraft, they switch on more or less very bluish light in order to adjust you a little bit to the time where you expect to land. So this is such an opportunity for us to get really our circadian rhythm synchronized to the 24 hours so that our mood is improved. It is well known already that alertness can be improved, especially when it comes to schooling situations for the students. And this is another nice opportunity, because I realized this morning the CO2 levels are already controlled in schools, so air quality is improved. This is an add-on that could be really help our students to get the alertness they need finally at school at the right time. We know today that you can increase the heart rate by illumination. You can definitely work on depression. You have a lot of opportunities really to influence the human behavior with light, and it is really a very nice opportunity to improve the value of the spaces. If you compare the different, I would say, models, and I mentioned earlier that UL did a design guideline that is not really a standard, it's a design guideline, and they came along with this circadian stimulus. Finally, what you will realize, it doesn't matter whether you calculate the circadian stimulus of a lighting situation or the medilux, it doesn't matter at all, because it will give you more or less the same information. And there is a recommendation, a very clear recommendation in the ULDG 24480, that between 7 o'clock in the morning and 4 p.m., the circadian stimulus in your application should be around 0.3 for a minimum of 2 hours. Then in the early evening hours, you should reduce the circadian stimulus, and after 8 o'clock, it should be below 0.1. So there is an, I would say, recalculated situation on the DNTS side, which is in line with the CIE SO26. As you can see, you should have some vertical illuminance of above 250 during the morning hours. Then in the evening times, you should have less than 10. And I just can tell you, if you really try to get such a lighting situation, which is still okay for working places, it is nearly impossible. Yeah? But so usually you should expect that this value is a little bit higher in your application, but there is at least a recommendation to go below 10 medilux. And finally, there is a recommendation that the illumination should be somewhere between 4,000 to 6,500 Kelvin. As a last hint, finally, what you can do in order to adjust your circadian rhythm to the 24 hours, you can work, if you want, really with just 2,700 Kelvin light sources. In order to activate, you need to have a very, very high illumination level. and during the evening hours, it could be a lower one. There is definitely the other opportunity to change the spectrum over the day, yeah, so that you come along with a very cool color temperature in the morning hours at a lower light level. But due to the fact that there is a lot of blue light involved, you will immediately tell your internal clock, hey, the day started. You adjust the internal clock and everything is fine. And then if it is possible by the lighting system to change the color temperature over the day, then you can go to warmer color temperatures, but even at a constant light level. Yeah, so there are different opportunities to reach finally the goal. And this is, again, all about control. And I would love, finally, there is an additional slide which I can skip. I would love to see sooner or later now solutions in the market which are really highly controlled. What can UL do? We developed already, and we launched this service starting in January 2023 in the US. We have a robot system which measures finally the spectrum of the light and the amount of light that is finally provided to the user. We analyze it room by room, and then we can come up with a heat map. And we can say, okay, if it is now accordingly to well, you just need to click to well, and then you get immediately the numbers which are in the well methodology. If you click to CIE SO26, you will get the Medilux, and finally the ULDG 24480, you get the information based on the circadian stimulus. So, but don't expect big differences. Yes, there are differences in the model, but they are minor. And with this heat map, you can immediately say, okay, let's work on this area which is red, because at this point, my employees will not be synchronized to the 24-hour day and night cycle. In order to provide even healthy lighting in this area, we could invest in a system over there. And finally, if you ask by renovation for such values, you can finally prove whether it is really fulfilled in your situation or not. So now, as you know, you like to rent your flats potentially to users. You can start and say, okay, let's promote the space I want to give away by a very healthy lighting situation. And what we did is we developed a so-called marketing claim verification topic, which is based on the different models, which could include well, and we could easily, for example, issue such an, I would say, such a mark, so that you finally can promote your building, your flats, with the aspect of healthy lighting, and this might give an additional value to your space. And this is the last slide. That is the idea, and it is funny to see that all the different components exist already. There is only now the task finally to combine them. What does it mean? So the lighting system in the room should be somehow controlled. And if we have some sensor technology available that gives us the spectral power distribution of the light and the light level, we could easily communicate and send those data to the cloud. The cloud-based algorithm could finally analyze it. What does it mean in regards to the Medilux or the circadian stimulus or the EML, which is used by WELD standards? And then there is already a cloud-based algorithm that can send the signals to the controls unit so that the lighting system only adds what is really required, because you might have rooms where the sun is shining into. Yeah, so perhaps there is not even the need for additional lighting. Yeah, The other way around, if there is a room somewhere in the center of the building that needs finally additional light, it could be easily switched on by the control unit. So I believe, and I know that all these parts already exist. I hope that I can come back again in 1 or 2 years and tell you it has come to truth. Perhaps now it is an opportunity for companies like Airthings to step into this lighting topic a little bit more, not only controlling the light level, but also controlling finally the spectrum of the light that gives you an additional benefit in order to synchronize your circadian rhythm to 24 hours. Thanks a lot.